Friday the 13th Part 3 may not have won over critics, but it exploded at the box office. And along the way, accidentally created one of horror's most iconic images when Jason first donned his hockey mask, simply because the effects supervisor happened to be a die-hard Detroit Red Wings fan. The production itself was unusually ambitious for the series, building the entire barn and farmhouse set from scratch. Structures that went on to appear in other projects until a group of drunken holidaymakers accidentally burned the house down in 2006. Behind the scenes, the filmmakers wrestled with multiple endings, one where Chris decapitates Jason, another where Jason decapitates her, and even one where Chris and Biker Ali escape together, before settling on the surreal canoe dream sequence fans know today. In this video, we're diving into all of these aspects and more, exploring much of what went on behind the scenes as well as Easter eggs and nods the movie referenced, as well as highlighting the different stages of Jason's look before we got to see the final reveal in the movie. So sit back, relax, and let's dive into one of this franchise's favorite entries. Instead of finding a convenient spot in the woods, the filmmakers actually built the entire setting from the ground up, including the house, the barn, and even a full lake designed specifically for the movie's scenes. But the man-made lake quickly became a problem. Because it wasn't sealed correctly, within the first week, the water they had pumped in had partially drained into the soil. This meant the crew had to constantly manage and refill it just to keep the location looking right on camera, turning what seemed like a simple set piece into a surprisingly high-maintenance part of the production. The house structure was sturdy enough that it stayed standing for years after filming ended. Even though it looked like a full two-story building on screen, it was really just a single-story set with high ceilings and raised platforms, designed only to look like a real home. Over the years, the abandoned set with the house, barn, and grounds was reused for other productions, including the slasher movie Twisted Nightmare. But in 2006, the house came to an end when a group of drunk holidaymakers stumbled across it, assumed it was an empty cabin, and broke in to spend the night. Trying to warm up, they lit a fire in the stone fireplace, not realizing the chimney was fake, just lightweight wood made to look real. The flames shot straight into the roof, the house caught fire, and the group fled, later posting photos online bragging in a Friday the 13th chat room that Jason is dead. Their actions made them infamous among fans. Hated enough that the creators of Friday the 13th Part 3, the Memoriam documentary, dramatized a revenge fantasy in which a Jason-like figure hunts them down and murders them in a bit of playful horror nerd justice for destroying a beloved piece of franchise history. The early idea for the movie would have brought back Ginny, played by Amy Steele from the previous film, showing her recovering in a psychiatric hospital after the trauma Jason put her through. The story would have followed Jason tracking her down, driven by revenge, and then killing the hospital's staff and patients as he closed in on her. Amy Steele was offered the chance to return, but she turned it down because she was already committed to other projects at the time. Years later, she admitted she regretted saying no, feeling she should have accepted the role after all. Jason's appearance in the film went through a clear transformation, starting with a simpler early look and evolving into the fully realized makeup that appears in the finished film. At the beginning of production, Richard Brooker wore Stan Winston's full facial prosthetics, which created a deformed skull shape, uneven features, and sunken eyes. This makeup was worn throughout filming, even under the hockey mask, and for a split second you can see it partially covered by shadow when Jason is walking around in the clothesline, though it was usually kept in shadow so audiences wouldn't see too much too soon. According to behind-the-scenes accounts, the Winston makeup was indeed used for most of the movie, even though the filmmakers originally planned to show Jason's face more clearly. Over time, the effects team refined the sculpt and paintwork into the final unmasked look, captured in on-set photos taken right after Brooker's makeup was completed. This final version emphasized heavy asymmetry, mottled skin, and exaggerated deformities, making Jason appear more monstrous and less human. The shift from the early, more basic prosthetic to the polished final design helped define Jason's identity in the franchise and set the visual foundation for how his unmasked face would evolve in later films. The original plan for the movie was to end the entire Voorhees storyline, and the filmmakers first wrote an ending in which Chris decapitates Jason with a farmer's sickle, bringing the trilogy full circle by giving the final girl a clear, definitive victory. But the producers hesitated, partly because they were already thinking about making a fourth film, and partly because decapitation leaves no wiggle room for a sequel, so they began brainstorming alternate endings. One idea flipped the script entirely, where Chris awakens in the canoe on Crystal Lake after the events of the previous evening left her as the lone survivor. She rows the canoe back to shore and begins walking towards the house looking exhausted. She then suddenly hears a noise from the house, and thinking it's Rick, begins to run to the porch of the house. Once she arrives at the front door, it suddenly bursts open and Jason emerges, surprising her. Jason then grabs Chris by the hair and chops her head off with a machete. These images show the original look of Jason Voorhees as well, but the footage was never edited into a finished sequence. After the decision was made to excise this original ending, the look of Jason was completely overhauled to what we now see in film today. Another proposed ending had biker Ali miraculously survive his earlier beating and jump in to save Chris, allowing the two of them to escape together. When authorities arrived, Jason's body would be missing, leaving the door open for future films. Ultimately, the studio rejected all of these options and chose the now famous canoe dream sequence instead, a decision that reflected the growing influence of studio executives who were prioritizing long-term franchise potential over creative closure, showing a pattern that would shape the series for years to come. Martin J. Sadoff, the 3D effects supervisor on the movie, ended up creating one of horror's most iconic images simply because he loved hockey and always carried his gear around on set. While the crew was testing different ideas for Jason's new look, Sadoff pulled out a Detroit Red Wings goalie mask from his bag, and Richard Brooker, the actor playing Jason, who was also a hockey fan, suggested they try it on. Director Steve Miner immediately liked how striking and eerie it looked, and after making a few adjustments to the mask's shape and markings, the team decided it was perfect for Jason. That spontaneous moment of experimentation turned into the birth of Jason's trademark hockey mask, now one of the most recognizable symbols in horror history. Larry Zerner's casting as Shelley is one of those rare Hollywood moments where chance, personality, and timing all collided perfectly. In early 1982, Zerner, who was then just 18, was standing on a street corner in Westwood handing out free passes for a test screening of The Road Warrior. Martin Kittrosser and Carol Watson, the film's screenwriters, happened to pass by and immediately noticed his big afro, slightly awkward charm, and the exact lovable misfit energy they had imagined for Shelley Finkelstein. When they asked if he was an actor, Zerner, who was a freshman theater student at the time, gave them his agent's number, which led to an audition with director Steve Miner. Miner told him not to perform but simply to be himself, because his natural personality already matched the insecure prankster they'd written. After a few callbacks, Zerner landed the role, which became his first professional acting job. His casting ended up shaping the entire franchise, as Shelley is the character who brings the hockey mask to Crystal Lake, and Jason only adopts it after taking it from him, creating the iconic look that defines the series. In a twist worthy of a movie, Zerner later left acting and became a successful entertainment lawyer, eventually becoming involved in the real-world legal battles over Friday the 13th, decades after helping create one of its most enduring symbols. For Friday the 13th Part 3, the production moved from Connecticut to California so the crew could work closer to the Hollywood technicians needed to pull off the film's ambitious return to 3D. But that change created an unexpected casting shakeup. Steve Daskowich, who had played Jason for most of Part 2, was told he could return only if he paid for his own airfare to California, which he refused, leading the team to recast the role. Director Steve Miner chose Richard Brooker largely because he needed someone physically imposing, and Brooker, standing 6 feet 3 inches but naturally slim, fit the height requirement even if he wasn't as bulky as previous portrayals. To give him the right silhouette, Brooker wore foam padding under his clothes, and he performed all of his own stunts, helping define the more athletic, intimidating version of Jason that Part 3 introduced. During production, the filmmakers tried to keep the story secret by using the fake working title Crystal Japan, named after a David Bowie song, so anyone outside the crew wouldn't realize a new Friday the 13th movie was being shot. This choice accidentally kicked off a loose tradition within the franchise, where later films would sometimes use Bowie song titles as their undercover production names as well. The idea was simple. A misleading title would draw less attention, reduce the risk of plot leaks, and keep fans or reporters from showing up on set. And Bowie's music just happened to provide titles that sounded mysterious enough to work while still being unrelated to the actual movie. This was the first movie to use the new Mark's 3D system, and because the technology was so unfamiliar, the crew had to learn everything as they went, which caused major delays and forced them to completely reshoot early scenes like the opening tracking shot and the convenience store sequence with Shelley and the bikers. The 3D cameras were extremely sensitive, so the team had to avoid certain colors and costumes, light every setup far brighter than usual, and spend hours preparing each individual shot, leaving the actors with long stretches of downtime between takes. The obsession with making the 3D effects work even shaped the performances. The cast was first told to practice paddleball tricks for a planned gag, and when that idea was dropped, the filmmakers kept searching for anything that would pop out toward the audience. Larry Zerner's juggling, a wallet tossed at the lens, a yo-yo dropping straight at the camera, often focusing more on these visual gimmicks than on acting. Additionally, the 3D version of the film opens with a special title card explaining that the first few minutes are in 2D, and that viewers should still wear their glasses. The film then continues as normal, with the recap of the ending of Part 2, presented in 2D, with the 3D officially kicking in when Jason pulls the machete from his shoulder. Chris's backstory was originally written to be far darker, as explained in Crystal Lake Memories. The writers first intended her past encounter with Jason to imply a sexual assault, hoping this would make audiences fully support Jason's death since the film was meant to end the series. Their thinking was that if Jason were portrayed as a rapist, viewers would have absolutely no desire to see him return in future sequels. However, the creative team ultimately decided this direction was too grim and risked pushing the character and the franchise into territory that felt exploitative rather than frightening. As a result, all hints of sexual violence were removed, leaving Chris's trauma vague and allowing Jason to remain a monstrous figure without redefining him in a way the filmmakers felt was inappropriate for the tone of the series. Tracy Savage, who played Debbie, quit acting entirely after Friday the 13th, Part 3, earned a journalism degree, and went on to build a long, successful career as a reporter, yet the connection to her horror film past never faded. Even as she covered major news stories, she continued receiving fan mail from Friday the 13th enthusiasts throughout her journalism career, a reminder of how strongly her role resonated with the franchise's audience and how enduring the film's cult following became. Debbie's hammock scene includes a small fun detail. When she opens her copy of Fangoria magazine, the article she flips past is actually about Tom Savini, the legendary makeup and effects artist who created the gruesome practical effects for the first, second, and later fourth films in the series. It's an easy moment to miss, but it works like a quiet nod to the man who helped define the franchise's early look, almost a hidden thank you tucked into the background of a casual character moment. Even though Savini wasn't involved in Part 3, the magazine cameo keeps his influence present, reminding fans how much his work shaped Jason's world. The opening store scene includes a subtle but meaningful nod to early film history. On the checkout counter sits a poster for The Great Train Robbery, released in 1903, which was a silent short film famous for ending with a bandit firing his gun directly at the camera. Contemporary accounts from that time describe early audiences ducking, screaming, or even covering their ears during that moment because they didn't yet understand how film images worked and genuinely felt as if they were being shot at. That early shock effect is often considered one of cinema's first attempts at creating an illusion that reaches out toward the viewer, essentially a prototype of the coming-at-you gimmick that 3D movies would later refine. By placing the poster in the store, Part 3 may very well be paying homage to that moment in film history, drawing a playful connection between the 1903 audience's startled reactions and the movie's own 3D tricks designed to make viewers flinch, duck, or recoil in the same manner. Several of the kills in the movie had to be heavily trimmed to avoid an X rating from the MPAA, and the cuts targeted some of the movie's most elaborate gore effects. Andy's death, originally shown in full as Jason sliced him in half mid-handstand, featured his leg being severed and his stomach ripped open, but most of that graphic detail was removed. Vera's death, with the spear gun firing directly into her eye, was shortened because the effect looked too realistic for the censors. Edna's knitting needle kill lost shots of excessive blood flow, while Chili's impalement was trimmed to remove a moment where steaming blood hit the floor. Debbie's death, an homage to Kevin Bacon's kill in the first film, originally showed blood running down her chest and splattering onto her face, but that too was cut down. Together, these edits softened what had been some of the film's most ambitious practical effects, reflecting how strict the MPAA had become with slasher violence by the early 1980s. And this ends our deep dive into Friday the 13th Part 3. It might look like a simple 3D slasher on the surface, but once you dig into the movie's production quirks, character choices, and the moment Jason finally claims the hockey mask, it becomes clear why this entry left such a lasting mark on the franchise. It's messy, inventive, occasionally baffling, and absolutely pivotal to the mythology we know today. So if you enjoyed exploring the layers beneath the blood in camp, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and stick around for the next dive into our favorite nostalgic cinema history. Until next time, thanks for watching, stay sharp, and we'll see you in the next video.